The deep black of space stretched endlessly around the survey vessel Odyssey, a small but sturdy ship built for exploration, not war. Inside, Captain Leo Grant stood on the quiet bridge, his eyes fixed on the star charts flickering on the main screen. He was a man in his late 40s with tired eyes and a calm voice that had guided his crew through asteroid storms, system failures, and the long silence between stars. Around him, the ship hummed softly, the steady rhythm of life support, the low buzz of scanners, the occasional tap of fingers on consoles. Maya Ruiz sat at the communication station, her dark hair pulled back, listening to the static whispers of distant pulsars. Ben Carter was below deck, elbow deep in engine diagnostics, muttering to himself as he tightened a loose coupling. Priya Desai, the ship's xenolinguist, was in the lab, studying fragments of alien symbols recovered from a dead moon 3 systems back. None of them expected anything unusual. This sector, designated K7R, was marked as empty on all known maps. No planets, no signals, no history. Then the sensors beeped. Leo turned. "What's that?" Maya frowned, adjusting her headset. Unknown object, massive, dead in space. No power signature, but it's huge. The screen zoomed in. A shadow emerged from the void, longer than 3 city blocks, jagged and ancient, its hull scarred by time and battle. Strange glyphs glowed faintly along its spine, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. It looked like a tomb drifting among stars. "That's not human," Priya said, appearing on the bridge, her eyes wide. "No," Leo agreed. "And it's not on any registry." For hours, they circled the derelict, scanning cautiously. The ship showed no signs of life, no radiation leaks, no traps, at least none they could detect. It was a ghost from a forgotten age. Priya matched the glyphs to fragmented records from old trade routes. "Cathari," she whispered. "They vanished over 800 years ago. Some say they destroyed themselves. Others say they ascended, but this is real." Leo made the call. They would send a boarding team at dawn ship time. Just a quick survey. In and out. Record what they could. He didn't want to touch it, not really. But humanity had always reached into the unknown. That was why they were out here. They never got the chance. Without warning, space itself seemed to tear open. 3 massive vessels dropped out of warp, ahead, behind, and to starboard. Sleek, silver, and bristling with weapons, they moved like predators. Their hulls bore a symbol, a coiled serpent wrapped around a burning sun. "The Valerian Empire." Maya's voice cracked. "They're hailing us." On screen, a tall, armored figure appeared. His skin was pale gray, his eyes black and unblinking. High Marshal Drell Voss. His voice was cold, sharp as broken glass. "Human vessel. Power down your engines. Prepare for boarding. You have trespassed on Imperial salvage grounds." Leo stepped forward. "We mean no harm. We're a scientific mission from the United Earth Coalition. We only just arrived." Voss didn't blink. "Your presence is contamination. Your species is irrelevant. Obey, or be erased." Before Leo could respond, the Odyssey shuddered. Tractor beams locked on. The ship groaned as it was dragged toward the largest Valerian vessel, the Imperator. Alarms blared. Ben sprinted onto the bridge, wiping grease from his hands. "Engines are locked. We can't move, and don't fight it," Leo said quietly. "Not yet." Inside the Imperator, everything was cold metal and harsh light. The humans were marched through towering corridors, past silent soldiers in black armor. No one spoke to them. No one even looked at them directly, as if they were insects beneath notice. They were shoved into a bare detention module, 4 walls, a bench, and a force field humming at the doorway. Hours passed. No food, no water. Just silence, then the door hissed open. 2 guards entered, followed by Voss himself. He loomed over them, his expression unreadable. "You found the Cathari warship," he said. "Foolish creatures. That vessel is a relic of a dead race, but it will serve the Empire well." Leo stood. "It's not yours to take," Voss laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "You speak as if you have a choice. Your world is a speck. Your fleet is toys. The Valerian Empire has ruled this quadrant for 5 centuries. We do not negotiate with vermin." Maya flinched. Ben clenched his fists. Priya kept her eyes down, but her mind raced, recording every word, every tone. "You think we're nothing," Leo said, his voice steady. "But you don't know us." "I know enough," Voss replied. "You build cities that crumble in storms. You fight wars over patches of dirt. You are chaotic, weak. Soon your colonies will burn and Earth will kneel, or be glassed from orbit." He turned to leave, then paused. "You will remain here until the Cathari vessel is secured." Then you will be disposed of. Your ship will be melted down for scrap. The door sealed shut. The force field buzzed back to life. Silence returned. But it was different now. Heavier. They're going to invade, Priya said softly. Ben nodded. They've been looking for an excuse. That warship? It's not just a relic. It's a weapon. Maya pressed her ear to the wall. I heard them talking earlier. They call it the Heart of Dominion. They think it can control entire fleets with a single command. Leo sat on the bench, staring at the floor. He wasn't thinking about escape, not yet. He was thinking about Earth, the parks in Chicago, the beaches in California, the schools in Nairobi, the farms in Iowa. Millions of lives unaware that a storm was coming. They see us as animals, he said. But animals don't build telescopes, don't write poems, don't send ships like this into the dark just to learn. Priya looked at him. What do? We listen, Leo said. We watch. And when the time comes, we make sure someone hears the truth. Outside, the Valerian fleet began moving. Tow cables extended toward the Cathari warship. Lights flickered to life along its ancient hull. Somewhere deep in its core, something awakened. And aboard the Imperator, in a cold cell far from home, 4 humans held their breath, knowing that the fate of their world might already be slipping away, unless they found a way to speak louder than empires. Days passed in the detention module like slow heartbeats. The humans were given thin nutrient paste and water, just enough to keep them alive. No one spoke to them. No one came except the guards who delivered meals in silence. The Valerian Empire treated them like ghosts, present but unseen, unworthy of attention. Yet Leo watched everything. He noted the shift changes, the patterns in the guards' movements, the way the force field flickered for half a second every 6 hours during system resets. He said nothing, but his mind worked like a clock, ticking off possibilities. Maya spent her time listening. Even through the thick walls, she could hear distant voices in the corridor. Orders, chatter, the hum of passing machinery. She had trained to pick out speech from noise, and slowly she began to understand more of the Valerian language. Their words were sharp, full of commands and obedience. But sometimes she caught something else. A sigh, a muttered complaint, a pause that sounded like doubt. Ben tinkered with anything he could find. A loose panel near the floor. A broken light fixture. He collected tiny pieces of wire and metal, hiding them in the seams of his jumpsuit. He didn't know what he'd build yet, but he knew tools could become weapons and silence could become signal. Priya wrote in a small notebook she'd kept hidden in her boot. She sketched the glyphs from the Cathari ship, compared them to what she'd heard from Valerian officers, and tried to piece together the Empire's plan. One phrase kept appearing, final convergence. It sounded like a military operation. A big one. Then, without warning, the door opened. High Marshal Voss stood there, flanked by 4 armored guards, his black eyes fixed on Leo. The Cathari vessel is ours, he said. Its systems respond to our command. Soon your colonies will fall without a single shot fired. Their shields will drop. Their ships will turn on each other. That is the power you stumbled upon. Leo didn't flinch. You don't understand what you're waking up. We understand power, Voss snapped. And you have none. But before you are erased, you will kneel. You will beg for mercy. It amuses me to see lesser beings grovel. He gestured, and the guards shoved the humans into a larger chamber, a command hall lined with tall windows, showing the blackness of space. In the distance, the Cathari warship floated, now glowing with Valerian lights. Officers stood at consoles, their faces proud, certain of victory. Voss turned to Leo. Speak, beg. The room fell silent. All eyes were on the human captain, small, unarmed, standing in a stolen uniform, facing an empire that had crushed 100 worlds. Leo took a breath. He thought of his sister back on Earth, teaching kids how to grow tomatoes in rooftop gardens. He thought of Ben's little niece who sent him drawings every month. He thought of Maya's parents who ran a bakery in San Diego, and Priya's students who dreamed of becoming scientists. He looked Voss in the eye. You want war? Leo said, his voice quiet but clear. Then understand this, you're not just fighting soldiers. You're fighting teachers, farmers, doctors, kids who haven't even learned to read yet. And every one of them will stand. Because when humans are pushed to the edge, we don't break. We burn. For a moment, no one moved. The Valerian officers stared, confused. To them, war was about fleets and fortresses, not school teachers or children. Voss let out a short, sharp laugh. Poetic nonsense. You speak like a poet, not a warrior. It changes nothing. But as he turned away, something shifted. A young officer near the back, a communications tech named Kale, froze. His fingers hovered over his console. He had recorded the transmission as protocol demanded. But now he hesitated. The words echoed in his mind. We don't break. We burn. Later that night, Kale sat alone in his quarters. He replayed Leo's speech. He had grown up hearing stories of the Empire's glory, of order and strength. But lately, he'd seen things. The burning of peaceful worlds, the silencing of dissent. The way even his own father had disappeared after questioning a supply order. He looked at the recording again. Then quietly, he copied it onto a data chip. He slipped it into a maintenance drone scheduled for a routine drop at a neutral trading post. Within days, the word spread. First, to a freighter captain who played it in a bar on Cygnus Station. Then to a rebel cell on the edge of Valerian space. Then to news feeds in neutral systems. You want war? Became a question whispered in alleys, shouted in protests, typed into encrypted messages across the galaxy. Humans weren't just victims, they were defiant. And that defiance sparked something dangerous in others. Back on the Imperator, Leo and his crew were returned to their cell. Voss thought the matter closed. But Maya heard new sounds in the corridors. Hushed arguments, faster footsteps, the clank of extra patrols. Something was stirring. Ben managed to rig a tiny receiver from scraps. Late one night, he picked up a faint signal, a human news broadcast from a colony near Alpha Centauri. The anchor's voice trembled as she quoted Leo's words. Captain Grant's message has reached us, she said. Earth stands ready. Priya smiled for the first time in days. They heard you. Leo nodded, but his eyes were distant. It's not about me. It's about what comes next. Meanwhile, Kale watched from the shadows. He saw officers glancing at each other during briefings. He heard whispers in the mess hall. What if the humans fight harder than we think? What if the Cathari ship turns on us? Doubt once planted grew fast. Voss noticed it too. His voice grew sharper. His orders more brutal. He declared martial law across 3 sectors. He ordered the immediate execution of the human prisoners to end this distraction. But fate had other plans. That same night, during the system reset, the force field flickered. Ben was ready. He jammed a piece of bent metal into the control panel outside their door, a trick he'd practiced in his head 100 times. The field died with a pop. Go, Leo whispered. They moved fast, sticking to service tunnels guided by Maya's memory of the ship's layout. Kale, watching from a security console, saw them on camera. He didn't alert anyone. Instead, he rerouted patrol routes, giving them a clear path toward the docking bay. As they ran, alarms began to blare, not for them, but from the Cathari vessel. Something had gone wrong. The ancient systems were resisting Valerian control. Lights flashed red across the Imperator. Chaos erupted. In the confusion, 4 humans disappeared into the belly of an empire that thought it was invincible. And somewhere in the dark, a single phrase kept echoing. You want war? It was no longer just a question. It was a warning, a promise, a spark. News of the Odyssey's capture reached Earth 3 weeks after the incident, carried by a slow courier drone that slipped through Valerian patrols. The message was brief, coded, and grim. Admiral Nora Green read it alone in her office at Lunar Command, her face pale under the soft glow of the overhead lights. She was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and hands that had signed too many loss reports. But her eyes were sharp and her mind moved fast. She called an emergency council. Within hours, Earth's top military and scientific leaders gathered in a secure bunker beneath the Rockies. They debated options, rescue missions, diplomatic appeals, preemptive strikes. All were dismissed as too risky or too late. The Valerian Empire was already mobilizing. Satellite scans showed fleets gathering near the outer colonies. War wasn't coming. It was already on the move, but Nora didn't give up. She remembered Leo Grant's file, his calm under pressure, his belief in dialogue over destruction. If he was still alive, he'd be looking for a way to fight back, not with guns, but with truth. She authorized Operation Ember, a quiet, desperate plan to prepare, not just to defend, but to unite. While Earth scrambled, Leo and his crew were hiding in the lower decks of the Imperator, moving like shadows. They had found an abandoned maintenance bay near the cargo docks. shielded from scanners by old radiation shielding. Ben worked non-stop, piecing together a short-range transmitter from scavenged parts. Maya monitored Valerian comms, filtering through layers of encryption. Priya studied every scrap of data they could steal, especially anything about the Cathari warship. One night, Maya intercepted a fragmented log from the Cathari vessel's core memory. It was damaged but readable. "The Dominion fell not by blade but by hunger," Priya translated, her voice hushed. "They conquered until there was nothing left to conquer. Then they turned on themselves. Their final entry says, 'We built an empire of stone but forgot to build hearts.'" Leo sat back. "They're repeating the same mistake." He looked at his crew. "The Valerian Empire thinks strength is control. But real strength is connection. If we can show that, if we can prove they're already breaking from within, we might not need to win a war. We might stop it before it starts." Ben finished the transmitter. It was crude, barely powerful enough to reach a nearby ship, but it would have to do. They needed a carrier, a neutral vessel passing through the sector. Maya found one, the Star Dancer, a freighter registered to the Free Systems Alliance, scheduled to dock for fuel in 6 hours. Using stolen access codes, they sent a data burst just as the freighter entered range. It contained Leo's speech, the Cathari logs, and a simple plea: "Tell them what's coming." 2 days later, the Star Dancer jumped to warp. On board, its captain, a grizzled man named Eli Vance, listened to the message twice. Then he contacted every contact he had. Within a week, the data was everywhere. Human colonies broadcast it on public channels. Rebel groups played it in secret meetings. Even Valerian citizens, tired of endless war and rationing, shared it in hidden forums. On Earth, Admiral Green saw the shift. Support for resistance grew overnight. Colonies began training civilian defense units. Scientists worked on countermeasures for the Cathari weapon. But more importantly, neutral systems that once stayed silent now spoke up. The Helios Concord declared the Valerian actions a threat to galactic stability. The Zenthar Collective halted all trade with the Empire. For the first time in decades, the Valerian Empire faced something it couldn't crush with force: doubt. Back on the Imperator, tension thickened. Officers argued in hallways. Supply lines slowed. Rumors spread that the Cathari ship was unstable, that it had killed 3 engineers who tried to interface with its core. High Marshal Voss grew furious. He blamed weak minds and ordered loyalty screenings. Anyone caught with unauthorized data faced execution. Kyle, the young comms tech, knew he was being watched. He had helped the humans escape, and though no one could prove it, his access logs were flagged. He moved carefully, erasing traces, but he also kept copying data. He believed in what Leo had said. He began sending small messages to dissident groups inside the Empire, locations of supply depots, patrol routes, morale reports. One evening, he found a note slipped under his door. It was written in rough Valerian script: "We hear you. Keep speaking." Meanwhile, Leo's crew prepared for the next step. They couldn't stay hidden forever. The Imperator was heading toward human space, leading the invasion fleet. They needed to get off the ship and take the full Cathari archive with them. Ben rigged a distress beacon to mimic a damaged cargo pod. Maya forged clearance codes using patterns she'd memorized. Priya compressed the Cathari data into a single encrypted drive, small enough to hide in a boot heel. The plan was simple. During the next supply transfer, they would slip into an empty pod, activate the beacon, and drift toward a neutral patrol zone. It was risky. One mistake and they'd be vaporized. The night came. The ship groaned as docking clamps released. Cargo pods floated away on magnetic rails. Leo, Maya, Ben, and Priya moved quickly, dressed in stolen maintenance uniforms. They climbed into Pod 47, sealed the hatch, and waited. The pod detached. It drifted into open space, tumbling slowly. Ben activated the beacon. A weak repeating signal. Malfunction. Request retrieval. For hours, nothing happened. Then a blip on the long-range scanner. A ship approached, not Valerian, but human. A scout from the outer colonies, part of Operation Ember's early warning net. As the rescue ship locked onto their pod, Leo looked back at the Imperator, now a shrinking shadow against the stars. He thought of Kale still inside. He thought of the words he'd spoken. They had traveled farther than he ever imagined. Admiral Green received the full Cathari archive 3 days later. She didn't just study it, she broadcast it. Every system, every station, every planet that could receive a signal heard the truth. Empires built on fear always fall, and in the dark corners of the Valerian Empire, people began to whisper not of conquest but of change. The Valerian Armada moved like a storm across the stars. Hundreds of warships burning toward the Sol system with cold precision. High Marshal Voss stood on the bridge of the Imperator, his face hard, his orders sharp. He would not be slowed by rumors or rebellion. Earth would fall, and with it the last spark of defiance in the galaxy. But even as his fleet advanced, cracks spread through his empire like ice on thin glass. Behind the front lines, former Valerian client worlds began to rise. On the mining planet of Draxus, workers shut down power grids, trapping Valerian garrisons in darkness. In the shipyards of Corallus, engineers sabotaged engine cores, causing explosions that crippled half a fleet before it could launch. Messages poured into Valerian command, reports of uprisings, missing supplies, traitors in uniform. Voss dismissed them as minor disruptions, but his officers exchanged worried glances. The Empire was bleeding from within. On Earth, Admiral Nora Green watched the incoming fleet data with steady eyes. She had spent weeks preparing. Human colonies had formed defense pacts. Old freighters were armed with jury-rigged weapons. Scientists had studied the Cathari logs and found something vital. The ancient race used a command frequency to control allied ships. If the Valerian Empire tried to use the same system, it could be hijacked. Green's plan was bold. Instead of meeting the fleet head-on, human and allied forces would strike at the edges, cutting supply lines and forcing the Valerian ships to spread thin. Then, when the moment was right, they would hit the command network itself. Meanwhile, Leo Grant and his crew were aboard the scout ship Wayfarer, racing toward the front. They carried the final piece of the puzzle, a data key that could unlock the Cathari command frequency. Ben had spent days refining it, testing it against simulations. If we can get close enough to broadcast it, he said, we might shut down their fleet like flipping a switch. The Wayfarer wasn't built for battle, but it was fast and quiet. It slipped through sensor nets, guided by Maya's sharp ears and Priya's knowledge of Valerian patrol patterns. They weren't alone. Dozens of small ships, freighters, scouts, even private yachts joined them, flown by volunteers from a dozen worlds. They called themselves the Ember Fleet. As the Valerian Armada neared Mars, the first real battle began. Not with lasers or missiles, but with silence. Human hackers working from hidden bases on Luna and Titan sent false orders through captured Valerian channels. Supply ships turned around. Patrols reported phantom enemies. Confusion spread. Then the Ember Fleet struck. They hit relay stations, communication hubs, and fuel depots, all lightly defended, all critical. Explosions bloomed in the dark like sudden stars. Valerian commanders shouted for updates, but answers came slow or not at all. For the first time, the mighty Empire felt blind. High Marshal Voss finally understood. This wasn't just resistance. It was coordination. And it was working. He ordered the Cathari warship, the Heart of Dominion, to activate its full command pulse. Bring their ships to heel, he snarled. Make them turn on each other. Deep in the Cathari vessel, Valerian techs initiated the sequence. A low hum filled space. Waves of energy pulsed outward, meant to seize control of any ship with a compatible receiver, including many human vessels retrofitted with old tech. But Leo was ready. From the Wayfarer, hovering near the edge of the Martian defense line, Ben triggered the counter-broadcast. The Cathari key sent out a new signal, not a command but a question. It asked every ship in range, "Who do you serve?" The effect was instant. Valerian ships wavered. Some shut down completely. Others turned their weapons not on humans but on their own command vessels. The Heart of Dominion itself shuddered, its systems overwhelmed by conflicting orders. Lights flickered and died across its hull. On the Imperator's bridge, alarms screamed. Consoles exploded in sparks. Voss roared in fury as his fleet unraveled before his eyes. At the same time, the main human defense force emerged from the shadow of Phobos. Led by Admiral Green in the battleship Resolute, they fired not at ships, but at the command relay satellites linking Valerian vessels. One by one, the links fell. Without coordination, the Valerian Armada became a collection of lone ships, powerful but lost. Human fighters darted between them, striking weak points, forcing retreats. The battle raged for hours, but the tide had turned. Leo watched from the Wayfarer as the Imperator, once a symbol of unstoppable power, listed to one side, its engines dark. He didn't feel joy, only relief. Then a new signal broke through the noise. It was Kale. Using a hidden transmitter, he broadcast from deep inside the Imperator. "The High Council has convened," he said, his voice shaking but clear. "They blame Voss for the failure. They are calling for peace." The message spread fast. Valerian ships stopped firing. Human forces held their positions. In the silence that followed, a single word passed between fleets: ceasefire. Admiral Green ordered all units to stand down. She opened a channel to the Valerian command. "We don't want your empire," she said. "We just want to live." On the Wayfarer, Leo leaned back, exhausted. Maya handed him a cup of water. Ben grinned, despite the burns on his hands. Priya stared at the stars, tears in her eyes. They had done it, not with more weapons, but with truth, timing, and trust. Far below, on the surface of Mars, civilians watched the battles end on cracked screens and handheld devices. Children hugged their parents. Farmers paused in their fields. Teachers held their students close. None of them had fired a shot, but all of them had stood. And in the broken heart of the Valerian flagship, Kale deleted his last message, knowing he might never see home again. But he also knew something had changed, not just in the war, but in the soul of his people. The Empire had met humanity, and for the first time it had blinked. Peace came slowly, like dawn after a long night. The Valerian High Council, shaken and shamed, removed High Marshal Voss from command and placed him under house arrest in a remote moon fortress. They sent envoys to Earth, not warriors but scholars and diplomats, carrying offers of ceasefire, reparations, and open talks. The war was over before it truly began, not because one side was stronger, but because the other finally saw the cost of pride. Leo Grant returned to Earth not as a conqueror, but as a quiet man in a worn uniform. Crowds gathered at the spaceport in Nairobi, waving flags and holding signs with his words. "We don't break. We burn." But Leo walked past them without stopping. He didn't want statues or speeches. He wanted to sit in a park, drink real coffee, and hear birds instead of alarms. Admiral Nora Green met him at a small cafe near the coast. She didn't wear her medals, just a simple blue jacket and tired eyes. "You changed everything," she said. "No," Leo replied. "People changed everything. I just gave them words to hold on to." Back on the Odyssey, now repaired and docked in lunar orbit, Maya Ruiz helped translate the first official treaty between Earth and the reformed Valerian Council. Ben Carter worked with engineers from 3 species to dismantle the Heart of Dominion, not to destroy it, but to study it, so no one would ever misuse its power again. Priya Desai joined a new galactic history project, recording not just battles but stories of ordinary people who chose courage over fear. And Kale, he never returned to Valerian space. Branded a traitor by hardliners, he accepted asylum on a human colony world called Haven, a green, quiet place far from empires and wars. He lived in a small house near a school, where he taught language and ethics to children of all species. Some days he walked to the edge of town and looked up at the stars, wondering if his family still lived, if they'd heard his message. He never knew. But he kept teaching, because someone had to show the next generation that power without kindness is just noise. Months passed. The United Earth Coalition formed the Alliance of Free Systems, a union built not on weapons but on shared rights and open borders. Former Valerian subjects joined. Neutral worlds signed on. Even old rivals sent observers. It wasn't perfect. Disagreements flared. Old wounds took time to heal. But for the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt like it might grow instead of break. One evening, Leo visited the memorial wall in Geneva. It was made of smooth black stone etched with names of those lost, not just in battle but in the quiet moments before the storm, when no one knew how dark things would get. He ran his fingers over the names of friends, neighbors, strangers who never saw the war but paid its price. A young girl stood nearby, holding her mother's hand. She looked up at Leo. "Are you the captain who talked to the Empire?" Leo knelt. "I'm just a man who said what he felt. Did it work?" He smiled. It gave people a reason to stand together. And that's what really worked. He left a single white flower at the base of the wall and walked away. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft gold and red. In the distance, children laughed, playing in the grass. A teacher led a group of students on a nature walk. A farmer drove a quiet electric cart loaded with vegetables. Life, simple and strong, went on. Later that week, Leo received a small package. No return address. Inside was a book, handwritten in careful Valerian script with human translations beneath each line. It was a collection of old Valerian poems about peace, loss, and hope. On the first page, a note. For the man who reminded us we are more than our weapons. Leo read it under a tree in his backyard, the breeze warm on his face. He thought about how small one voice seemed in the vastness of space. But then he remembered the freighter captains, the rebel engineers, the teachers who kept schools open during blackouts, the kids who shared rations with strangers. One voice had started it, but millions had carried it forward. On Haven, Kale stood in front of his classroom. His students, Human, Valerian, Zenthar, and more, sat quietly waiting. He held up a small device, an old Earth-style speaker. Today, he said, we listen. He pressed play. Leo's voice filled the room, calm and clear. You want war? Then understand this, you're not just fighting soldiers. You're fighting teachers, farmers, doctors, kids who haven't even learned to read yet. And every one of them will stand. Because when humans are pushed to the edge, we don't break. We burn. The children were silent for a long moment. Then a small Valerian boy raised his hand. Does that mean we don't have to be afraid anymore? Kale looked out the window at the green hills, the blue sky, the future stretching ahead. No, he said softly. It means we choose what comes next. And in that quiet classroom, on a peaceful world far from empires and battles, the echo of one human's words helped build something new. Not a weapon, not a throne, but a promise that kindness could be just as powerful as fire.